guys. Here we go. Tony, it's all you.
Okay, let's see. So I guess let's start in the basement.
Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty much where everything of concern is, okay? So I'll start with kind of item one is the general deterioration of the concrete wall, which I'm sure everyone has noticed. No, it's just typical. It's an older structure to a certain extent, particularly of materials that are exposed to moisture, which this wall would be. Moisture eats away at that material's age and its lifespan. So that's what's happening here. I don't. It's, you know, we're talking maybe a maximum of like, honestly, probably about like quarter inch, half inch in most areas.
Quarter inch and half inch of what?
Deterioration.
I see.
In the worst areas.
That much material has come off.
Yeah, and what's causing it is just saturation of the soils on the exterior. That moisture works its way inward and builds up on the interior surface, and whatever minerals are in that soil, typically alkalis, will eat away at that concrete, and that's what you're seeing. And you get small, you get spalling, so little pieces fall off and gather on the floor, and there's not a whole lot you can do on the cheap end. Probably the cheapest fix would be to control drainage on the perimeter. Make sure there's no areas of ponding, or even better yet, and might not work with your landscape plan, but put a sidewalk around the perimeter so that any moisture that does get in the soil against the building kind of has to really work its way back around under the slab and towards your basement. But again, I don't know what the plan would be, but that sidewalk typically, and I'm quoting geotechnical engineers on some recommendations they give us, but usually about a 5-foot slab, and that tries to get, you know, that soil away from the foundation. I don't see any signs that this deterioration has caused problems in way of either settlement cracking or rotation of the wall from resisting the soil pressure. So that's good. The concrete itself looks plumb. That slump block we were talking about, that's around the perimeter. That is the upper 3 courses. So you do have cast in place basement walls with that block 3 courses above that. Generally speaking, this first course is still below grade. So on the exterior, upper 2 courses are exposed. So this would be the exterior soil line on most of the house. At these openings, they're blocked out because the soil is, you know, to that level. The block is in a little bit rougher condition in that, as I mentioned, it's not reinforced, it's just stacked and mortared together. So for whatever reason, I don't think it's necessarily settlement, maybe just moisture intrusion and breaking the joints apart, and those have been repaired over the years. You do have a little bit of movement between the blocks. In general, I don't see anything concerning, except for I believe that's the 7th Street side.
That's the east. That's east.
It is the east, yeah.
East and 7th Street, yes.
Again, same conditioning happening around most of the perimeter of the house, where you have moisture migration through the concrete and basically causing some spall on the interior surface.
Do you have an opinion about what these different looking blocks are here? We see them in the corner down there. We see them on each side of these 2 windows.
It could just be I mean, just from my experience on older homes, they kind of just use what they had on hand.
Okay. What about this this leaning here that I see?
That's why we came over here. I don't know why that happened. My first thought was that for whatever reason, because we are a little bit below grade with that lower course, that it possibly pushed that joint in where we have this little concrete curb and where the block meets, that curb had some inward rotation. But I don't think that's what happened. Looking at, it's hard to see, but that last joist, the rim board, let me turn my light on. And there's probably going through a bunch of spider webs there, but it's hard to see, but the rim board is actually pushed out at its base. So where it meets the block is further out than where it meets the wood decking.
Okay.
I don't know why that happened, couldn't tell you, but that lean and that outward push of that rim board, they're like this.
Okay.
So that's the lean that you see. I don't think it's soil induced. I think that something caused that joint to slide out.
Do you believe possible that it's associated with any of this stuff here?
I don't.
Because this is big and thick, right, and done.
It is. It's hard to know how they poured this. I don't know that it's solid concrete. They probably did somewhat of a soil step as they were digging this out, formed it, and that inward profile, it's your outward profile, a nice smooth 90 degree. That inward soil probably did something like this.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It seems logical that it looks as though something hit that upper course and caused it to go out. I don't know how that would happen. The other possibility is that something severely loaded this side of the house. This is not a bearing wall, this is your gable end. So it's not really loading from the roof. But another option would be that we have your last joist sitting on the edge of the block. If something really loaded that and wanted it to make it rotate, that could have been a secondary cause of what happened here.
It's hard to imagine what that would be, though.
Yeah, I have no idea. It would have to have been something really heavy placed right against the wall.
At a time when it was vulnerable to motion too, because right, I mean,
it's just a weird condition. There's nothing here currently that kind of gives any clues as to what happened.
Do you think that this is still moving?
I don't think so. What I was looking for when I saw this was concerned that the structure above maybe had some downward movement along with it. The floor, when you're up, I think this is the living room.
We're under a bedroom here. The
bedroom? Okay.
Corner bedroom.
I think somewhere on this side of the wall up above, you can feel the floor probably around this point dip down just a hair. Probably coincides with that outward movement and that slight drop in the floor. Other than that, I don't really see any damage. Obviously the age of the house, when this happened, there's been plenty of time to repair and hide anything that's happened. One thing that I would expect to see is some cracking or separation of the joint between the concrete curb and the bottom of the block.
You're talking about
exactly
right
in
at the
there.
base.
I don't see any cracking there, so either the joints were repaired over the years, which they probably were, or I hate to say it was built that way, but
it might have been built that way.
Yeah. There's really no other evidence.
For example, what if the pour itself wasn't level on top?
Yeah.
And the guys just said, we're going to stack these blocks and then adjust when we get to the sill plate.
And that's very likely. And then when they put the sill and that rim board on, maybe they were plumb at first, but because the ball had an outward lean, it slowly kind of settled into the same position.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, but I don't see any signs that there is continuation of movement. It's really obvious on the outside because your stucco follows that line as it gets to the bottom of the framing.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of is what it is. I don't, the framing up on the roof looks fine in this area.
Any indications on the upper walls interior of anything that would be a concern?
There's really not.
Okay, and is that pretty much it for this area?
Yeah, other than this here, the basement looks great.
Do you like all these supports and whatnot?
Um,
Some of it looks like we found some lumber that looks more recent.
yeah, there's it's typical of older basements and floor framing. Kind of just put a mess of supports kind of where they need them,
Mm-hmm.
where you might have walls above. You'll even find some areas where they retrofit because they put something heavy above at some point.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how they built homes back then. You won't find anything like that now
Mm-hmm.
because this is just a basement slab, not necessarily a dedicated load path. As you would find in modern design, you would have dedicated beams and footings. So it's just of a different area. I don't see any signs though that the slab is cracking from load.
I mean, to my uneducated eye, this slab actually looks really good.
It does look really good. It does. You know, it has control joints, and I don't see any spider cracking between. So it does. It looks really good. The walls are a little bit different story, of course. The one thing I wanted to point out was I was actually asking the general home inspector too. This area has a kind of an overall, almost looks like smoke damage,
I see that.
combined with some water staining. But I don't see, and he kind of agreed too, that the water staining wouldn't necessarily cause that overall dark tint.
No, not the blackening like
Yeah,
that.
so this looks a lot like smoke damage, possibly a fire. Something happened down here at one point.
I don't see any like alligatoring of the wood.
No, there's definitely no charring. So it's just on the surface, but I just wanted to point it out. I don't see any damage actually to the joists or cracking and such that they were weakened by this.
I'm going to submit for your consideration that this is where the old coal burning furnace was located,
That's a good
and
point,
that this
yeah.
was the coal chute right here
Okay.
because it's in proximity to the old exhaust chimney.
Okay.
And these houses all had old coal
Oh,
chutes.
cool. Okay.
Mhm.
And it would have tied in.
Somewhere in
Is there
here,
any opening in the chimney?
not on this, not what I can see here, but they had to have an exhaust, right?
Yeah.
Actually, here's the patch on this side.
You got it over there? Oh, okay, cool. Man, you're smart.
Look at that. Forensic.
I'm not just.
coal-
I'm not qualified to say these things.
I guess anything coal burning in a home is like beyond my time.
Yeah, that's that's
And
super.
then yours too. though.
Yeah, very old school.
So that's a good point. So like I said, it's obviously some smoke damage, but no charring. Yeah,
Okay.
I do a lot of fire inspections too, and that stuff you can really just sand it off, and it's
Okay.
fine and everything.
Okay, good. All right, are we going back up?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, good, sorry,
Just take a little structural video
Good,
here.
yeah, awesome, keep doing what you're doing.
And just generally speaking, I think I mentioned the floor framing looks great. There's not any areas, even back into the crawl space area, there's not a lot of deflection. No cracks that I could see, so that's great. Same thing with the roof. And so this is the side where we had that outward movement.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that there's a dip in the floor.
Well, I don't think it's coming through on video, but I can see it live.
Right.
It starts at a high point right here and dips out.
Yeah.
We noticed the floors the first time we were here. It's
Yeah, it's for the most part, it's kind of shimmed up, if you will. So you're going to get areas of different levels of support. So they're not all spanning the same. So some areas are going to be a lot more rigid because they have closer supports than other rooms. So that's just to be expected. Again, I don't see any evidence that there's something kind of actively happening as far as active movement. But it's just a point of caution. Yeah.
Understood.
Okay. There's really not much to talk about in the attic. I did talk to, not you, but
Matt.
but them on the phone. They were asking about load-bearing walls. So
Did they go up there with you?
No.
Okay,
I
fine.
don't think so. I don't know if they went up there while I was walking around.
We have been up there previous to this
Okay.
trip today.
Okay. The framing, it looks to be in really good shape. It's kind of what I told them, a bit of a space frame. So meaning that you don't have dedicated beams. You have roof rafters that cantilever up and meet at the ridge. You have kickers that come down to different wall lines. So it makes their question of which walls can I or can't I remove, it varies. There's a lot of bearing walls throughout the home. And that translates to probably some shoring down in the basement. So if we're going to remove walls, we kind of have to take that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Look at whether that's a load-bearing wall, is it just holding up the ceiling joists, and analyze how much load is in that line, what kind of beams you need, and of course, and I went through all this with them, carry that load path down to the basement. So wherever that header or beam terminates, probably have to have a shore down in the basement and take it down to the slab if the load's light, or actually cut it in the footing.
Cool.
So that's that. I think more along the lines of the moisture in the basement. Sorry. Don't get that on video. So, like I was saying, you could be getting ponding or saturation of the soil in certain areas that are likely contributing to that moisture. Again, that concrete's been there for a really long time, so it's hard to assess how much moisture you're getting. If this was a newer structure and you had that much spalling, be really concerned. Probably the only way to absolutely fix that would be to remove the soil and apply waterproofing on the exterior of that concrete wall. Obviously time intensive, labor intensive, and expensive. So the best you could probably do is try and get the water moving away from the home as quickly as you can with either a slab or some type of other, a little bit more impervious material.
Maybe guttering.
Guttering, right. But that's kind of general. You have pockets of moisture buildup around the perimeter, and if you walk around, you'll see that. Out here looking down the line, you obviously see the outward movement of the framing. And again, the stucco isn't cracked in a manner that would say that this is actively moving or has really moved a lot in the life of this stucco. So my guess is that defect is relatively stable.
Yeah, I don't really see the same kind of separation, or I see the angle of the stucco that you're referring to, but the corners are making me less concerned out here.
Yeah, it comes back plumb at the corners.
It comes back to plumb.
Most of that outward movement is at the center. Yeah.
All right.
So again, I don't know. Maybe something happened in the basement and pushed that wall out. Who knows?
Maybe a car jumped the curb and hit the house.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But that would be pushing in, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah, it would. So like you said, maybe the wall was built out of plumb, and over the years it's just kind of settled into that shape.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot to see from the perimeter. Obviously, there appears to be a little bit of dry rot on some of this exposed wood that's been painted over. It's typical,
Yeah.
but usually it's just that very tip. So I wouldn't say that it really affects the integrity of the framing too much. if at all.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's about all the items in general. It's kind of the same idea around the whole perimeter of the house. Moisture, a little bit of cracking of that block, spalling on the interior. It's mostly the basement that has the concerns.
Let me ask you my standard question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being this house needs to be scraped away because it's a disaster, 1 being the most perfect structure you've ever seen.
Let's see. Considering, I think the biggest ding obviously is this side. I think this is fixable.
Mm-hmm.
The spalling of the concrete is hard to repair.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming you can get the moisture under control and it pretty much stabilizes as is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that there's really a whole lot to be concerned with the concrete. You know, the block is kind of what it is. You know, other than this side, it seems relatively plumb. We can repair the joints.
So let me reverse the scale.
I
1 is the worst,
Yeah,
10 is the
I'm
best.
trying to figure out where it fits.
Yeah.
The roof framing looks great. The walls, I don't know if they're covered. I would say it probably fits probably right in the middle. Because it's in good shape, but again, materials do have a certain life to them, especially when exposed to moisture. So, and being that a lot of that is in the basement, which holds the whole house up, it's hard to repair. Yeah,
You don't think this house is slipping into the earth?
definitely not.
Okay.
Um,
Is it dangerous in any way, you think?
no, nothing that I've
No
seen.
collapsing walls or ceiling
No,
situation?
I have to put a little bit of asterisk with just this side that we've been talking about. I don't know how recent that is. It doesn't seem to be recent. But if that's actively moving, you could have some partial slippage of that wall. I wouldn't call it a collapse, but it could drop on you. Not significantly, but you'll notice it and you'll have to repair it.
Over time.
But it's not a load-bearing wall.
Okay.
You'll see it's actually a gable end, so it won't have that much detrimental effect outside of specifically that wall.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't think of anything else, we're going to call that good.
Okay. And again, I think that's repairable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
Of course.
See you on the next one.
All right.